Слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Thank you very much, my friends, for coming here today once more to this rally where we tell the world what is going on in Ukraine and how we're going to stop this war once and for all. But before we go any further, we're going to start this rally, as we always do, with the Ukrainian anthem. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть! Смерть! Смерть!
Another day, another downed Russian plane near the Ukrainian border, my friends. That's right. The Russians just can't get enough of the Ukrainian air defense systems. And for that we have to thank every single country that has provided them. In this case, in particular, we have to show thanks for the USA for giving us the Patriot air defense systems. They have been very effective at finally bringing some peace to these these Russian warplanes. The Ukrainian warplanes, however, are coming soon. And it will mean that Ukrainians finally have the means of defending themselves against Russian attacks via the air. Unfortunately, as we all well know, there's been some individuals who've been trying to put sticks in the wheels for the provisions of these unbelievably important weapons. These individuals, for example, in the EU, like Orban and Fico, they have been very instrumental for the Russian terrorist regime because they can do something that the Russian regime cannot. They can present the same exact arguments the Russians are presenting, but from a different angle, a more palatable angle for people who are not defined, in their opinion, in terms of what they want to do to finally end this war in Ukraine. But my friends, we must be unequivocal, and we must say it together, that the only way for us to stop this war is for us to stop Russia. Stop Russia! Stop the war!
Stop Russia! Stop your war!
Stop Russia! Stop the 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 war!
Fighter jets for Ukraine!
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine! Thank you.
Air defense for Ukraine!
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. It's good to see that people still haven't forgotten what's going on in Ukraine. Because Putin, as we mentioned before, has passed a new piece of legislation not so long ago. A legislation that enables the current Russian state to annex any territories that in any point in the past belonged to either the Soviet Union or to the Russian Empire. That's right. You've heard it right, my friends. That is what Putin has passed, the piece of legislation that he has passed. That would mean all of Eastern Europe, Eastern Germany, and even Alaska. So for all the American isolationists who might think that this war is not their war and this issue is not their issue, my friends, Putin will be coming for you very soon. As soon as the West gives an idea of weakness, as soon as Russia smells blood in the water, they will strike. What they want in Ukraine now is not a ceasefire. What they want in Ukraine is to recover their strength and go for another try. And perhaps next time, they will be more ambitious in their conquest. They will be better prepared. They will amass more money. We cannot allow that to happen. We have to stop this evil whilst it's reeling from the punches they took in Ukraine, from the Ukrainians beating back their forces again and again. But my friends, we have to also remember, this war is not won yet. It is unwise to praise the day before sunset. And that is what every single one of us needs to remember. Ukraine needs the provisions of weapons. Ukraine needs help. That is the only way that this war is going to be held at bay from the rest of Europe. Because as soon as Ukraine falls, Russia will go for the Baltic countries. It is certain. For Moldova, I don't even say for Belarus, because Belarus might as well be a region of Russia at this point. The war in Ukraine is ongoing because Russia wants to annex Ukraine in its full completion. But Russia didn't even have to have a war for Belarus, because they had already controlled the Belarusian government. And that is the problem, my friends. The people of Belarus do not want to be under the Russian terrorist regime. They want to be free, just like the Ukrainian people are. They wanted to do what was right, and they tried their best. They did their own revolution. However, the Russian tanks were ready this time, and they plunged into Belarus, they plunged into Kazakhstan, and put down the peaceful protests of the people who wanted to be with the free world. That is how the Russians deal with dissent. That is how Russians deal with their opposition. For that, we say for the whole world, world, wake up!
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 Russia is a terrorist state!
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 Help Ukraine protect peace!
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 Arms keep peace. This is something very simple to understand, and yet many of the demagogues pocketed by the Russian terrorist regime keep claiming otherwise. They keep saying as if helping Ukraine is only going to be a strain on the budgets of the Western countries. They keep saying that those weapons are only putting more fuel in the fire. What kind of logic is that, my friends? That to help somebody who's defending himself against the aggressor is putting more fuel in the fire? Is that really what we would say somebody who did nothing wrong and who's getting attacked by a psychopath on the street? It's calling the police putting more fuel on fire. Perhaps the police tasering the guy. The killer with a knife in his hand is putting more fuel in the fire. Oh, but if you use violence to stop them, you're no better than they are. That's a mere platitude, my friends. Idiocy. Apologetics like these have no weight in a proper discussion. And they know it. That is why our opposition never even attempts to debate us, never even attempts to engage us in a straightforward, back and forward argument. The little debate. We've counter-protested many times against many different groups. Some of them, nothing more than brain-dead conspiracists. Others, slightly more refined hypocrites and apologists. But all of them united with one thing only: the Russian propaganda in their brain and the Russian rubles in their pockets. That is what unites them all, my friends. Those are the only things that unite them. Because if you put two different people of two different political spectrums that both support Russia in the same room, they will kill each other after a mere 5-minute talk. Personally, I was very surprised to find hardcore communists in the same exact rally as hardcore far-right white supremacists. And it's very interesting, because Russian propaganda works just as well in both. On one side, whilst the communists are being told that Ukrainians are a bunch of Nazis, the actual Nazis that support Russia are being told that Ukraine is a Zionist Jewish state. It's amazing, really. It doesn't take a genius to understand that somebody who says different things to different people just to get more support is not somebody who actually holds any truth in their hand. It's not somebody who speaks the truth. It's somebody that wants to control, to manipulate, and to destroy. To destroy the West as much as they can. That is the point of all this Russian propaganda pouring in the West. Trying to destabilize, trying to separate, trying to subvert. And it will continue. Make no mistake. It will continue until we finally wake up and we move towards victory for Ukraine. That is the only way to stop the Russian terrorist regime. You don't stop a war by appeasing the aggressor. We've tried that in World War II, or rather before it. And look where that got us. We've tried to negotiate with Russia in the past. And this is something I've heard not too long ago, Nigel Farage himself say, one of these lovely apologists. He said so himself, his words, not mine. Why don't we simply negotiate with Russia? Why don't we go to the negotiating table? Well, I have a little message for Mr. Farage. We tried, it failed, and let's not try that again. Because as you all well know, to try the same thing over and over again, what's expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. And we must not join the ranks of the insane. We must understand what's going on and move to a better future. To negotiate with Russia is to invite a fate equal or even worse to that of Yevgeny Prigozhin, the ex-leader of Wagner, who tried his absolute best to kill as many people as possible in Ukraine, for which Putin has praised him. But the very moment that Prigozhin has started to criticize the Russian government, the very moment that Prigozhin started to tell the truth about what really was going on in Russia and the real reasons for the start of this war that the Russian terrorist regime had started, he was killed. Interesting, isn't it? That Prigozhin lost a lot of his popularity with the Russian regime, but not with the Russian people, mind you. Prigozhin entered Rostov-na-Donu with his army, and he was greeted with applause. That is what really got under Putin's skin. That is the real issue he had with Prigozhin. Not because he was committing war crimes. Putin invites war criminals in his court. And indeed, I call it a court, not a parliament. Because in a parliament with checks and balances, the rule of the president is never absolute. But in a court, the word of the Crimson King is law, and nothing else matters. And in this case, the word of the Muscovite Khanate is law. Whatever the Khan says will be done. And if it's not done, violence ensues. That is how Russia is ruled, my friends. It's not a free country. It's not a politically or ideologically or even culturally a European country. What little European influence Russia has was stolen from the Ukrainians. Because as you all well know, the Kievan Rus had its heartland in Ukraine. And its culture was Ukrainian. And that is what the Russians refuse to admit. That is what they can never admit, because it destroys a lot of the main points they made to start this war. But we must speak about it, my friends, so that people don't forget, so that people remember what happened in the past, so that they avoid those mistakes, so that they don't step on the same rake over and over again. That is our message, my friends. To stop this war, we need to stop Russia. Because if Russia stops fighting, the war ends. But if Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends. I think we can see the distinction between these two countries and why trying to equate them and put them on equal footing is silly at best and hypocritical at worst. Arm Ukraine as you promised.
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 Stop Putin, stop the war.
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 Stop Russia, 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 stop the war.
I believe in the past Obama has said something similar. That although the West has far more power than any countries like Russia, Iran or North Korea, although in terms of sheer power, they are incomparable to the full might of the free world, they do have an advantage over the West. It is because they know how to chip away at the trust in the many different Western agreed, keep in mind, agreed laws. Whilst in those countries, whatever the leader says is law. There is no disagreement. There is no infighting. I mean, there was with the Wagner group, but stupid Prigozhin decided to make a deal with Putin. And once again, we all know how that ended. But my friends, the point is, Putin is not going to leave the office. The same can be said about the leaders in North Korea and about the leaders in Iran. They're not going anywhere. They're not going out of power until there is a coup and until they are deposed, because those countries are not free. The people don't have the freedom and the ability to vote their leaders out of power. But here they can. And that is why Russia is attacking the common folk among anything else. They're bribing the politicians and filling the heads of the common folk with lies. That is what we must stop, my friends. That is the moment that we come in. We have to tell people what really is going on in Ukraine. That to stop supplying Ukraine with weapons is not going to stop the war, but instead it's going to start a genocide. And for all these individuals who think that no way Russia would start a genocide, no way, impossible, poor, little, defenseless, innocent Russia starting a genocide, no. These are conspiracies, certainly. But my friends, we should know better than that. All it takes is a quick search. We need to do some research into history, into Russian history. And with the minutest research, doesn't even have to be that much, you will realize that Russia is your enemy. Russia is everybody's enemy. Putin has spread this saying himself lately, and this is a popular saying in the Russian Empire. Russia has no borders. What does this mean? Does it mean that Russia allows anybody in? No, my friends, that's not what it means. It's quite the opposite, really. That Russia will continue expanding until Russia is stopped. That is what it means. And that is why, my friends, we have to remember that this war is not only a war that includes the Ukrainians. This is not a local war. This is a global war, a global struggle against the free world, a concentrated effort by the terrorist regimes and their terrorist proxies. Because of course, it's not just North Korea, Iran and Russia that are the enemy. There are so many proxies that they support fully and that they fund and that they allow to destabilize the many different countries around the world. We have to remember this, my friends. We have to remember it. Because if we don't, we are bound to repeat the same mistakes of the past. And that is something we should not do. There's this placard facing me right now. The Nova Kakhovka Dam. It's been a terrible day for a lot of people when the Russians decided to blow it up for just the minutest gain. And of course, as clockwork, the Russians have blamed the Ukrainians of doing it. Although the Ukrainians did not have the means to do it. Although the Russians were the ones who were controlling the Nova Kakhovka power plant, the dam, excuse me. That is what they're trying to do. It doesn't matter if it's believable or not. What matters is to keep slinging mud at the wall. And some of it is bound to stick. And of course, who else but our dear friend Tucker Carlson picked up this ridiculous conspiracy theory and started spreading it around as if it were the gospel. That's right. And I repeat his argument. He called Zelensky all kinds of names. And after doing so, after all of this name calling and lack of arguments, he said that because of all of this, any honest person will know that the Ukrainians were most likely responsible for the blowing up of the dam. I mean, ingenious, truly. Grade A journalism right there. The same individual who had lied in the past about the voter fraud allegations in the US and was caught lying in the Dominion court case has decided to lie again. Because why stop until he is stopped? This, my friends, is how all of these scammers, all of these criminals act. They continue to do what they've been doing because nobody's stopping them. Not because they feel unjustified, not because they feel downtrodden, not because they feel like something has been taken from them. The Russians have accepted Ukrainian sovereignty more than once, more than twice. Before they started this war in 2014, the Russians have signed further treaties with Ukraine to stop further aggressions and have broken every single one of them. You'll never find Tucker Carlson talking about that. You'll never find Tucker Carlson talking about the Budapest Memorandum or the friendship agreement between Ukraine and Russia. You'll never see any of that, my friends. You'll never find Nigel Farage talking about the fact that this war matters for the rest of the Europeans. It matters to stop it in Ukraine, to stop Russia, and to prevent this from going any further. They never speak about this. They never call Putin directly a criminal and a crook and a war criminal, in fact. They never say that. Because some of their voters are going to stop voting for them. Orban, Fico, they're no better. They're even worse, we could say. Because they're even more direct in trying their best to destroy the Ukrainian cause in the eyes of the Europeans. But my friends, I hope that one day the Hungarian people will remember the terrible things that the Soviets had done to them. I hope they will remember it. And I hope they will also remember that they are part of the EU, that they are part of NATO, and they are directly in opposition to the interests of these organizations that they are part of. And if that doesn't work on them, if remembering all of this doesn't work in shifting their minds into a reasonable place, well, my friends, I think they should remember that they are far from the most important members of NATO or of the EU. And if they continue to try to destabilize it from within, well, it might just so happen that the benefits in keeping them as part of those organizations might be outweighed by the detriments, by the many detriments that are brought by their betrayal. Now let's make no mistakes here. Orban and Fico are traitors. They are betraying NATO, and they are betraying the EU, and they are betraying their own people. Because their people have suffered in the past because of the Soviet Union. And the Ukrainians have suffered in the past because of the Soviet Union. So the least we can do is remember the suffering of those people and act accordingly to make sure that it never happens again. To make sure that we are united and not divided as Russia would love to see it. That we have leaders that know what's best for their countries and want international relations and are not these isolationist nutcases that are being put forward in front of us so many times with Russian rubles overflowing their pockets. That is the only way for us to influence the politics of the West, my friends, and to remind everybody what truly is important in this situation, to stand united. All together, we will win.
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 Thank you, Britain.
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 Ukraine, stay strong.
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 There was a moment of hesitation there before saying the next saying, my friends, because I was considering whether or not I should thank the British people themselves or to thank the world for the help that Ukraine is getting. But I think it's more important to thank an isolated nation that has helped us more than almost any other nation around the world, my friends. This great country of Great Britain has been one of our staunchest allies in this situation. When the world was getting cold feet and not wanting to send Ukraine the tanks that Ukraine needed, the UK sent us their Challenger tanks. When the world was getting uncertain and was saying that sending long-range missiles would be escalating it too much, the UK sent us the Storm Shadow missiles. For that, we say thank you. Because it's unbelievably important that every single one of us in the whole world treats this matter with utmost urgency. This is a serious matter, my friends. We can no longer expect that with some little help, some little change, the Ukrainians are going to manage to win. Russia is counting on the governments of the West electing other people more friendly to his cause in the future. Russia is waiting for elections in Europe, in the US, everywhere else. That is why we must make sure that the Russians understand that this situation is unwinnable for them. But the only way for us to do so is for the world to follow the great example of the United Kingdom and to finally call a spade and say that we want Ukraine to win. Because that is the only way we're going to stop Russia from going any further. It is very unfortunate that some countries, like Hungary and Slovakia, that are closer to Ukraine, that are our neighbors, that have a past of being oppressed by the Soviet Union, do not possess the understanding that the British people do about the danger of the terrorist Russian regime. It's interesting that even some faraway countries like Portugal, that have nothing to do with the Soviet Union, understand very well the dangers of Russia. They never had to go through the suffering from the Soviet Union as the Ukrainians had to, but they still understand it. They've looked into history and have seen reason. And we hope that the rest of the European countries are going to follow the example of our Portuguese friends, of our British friends, of our Polish friends, our Lithuanian friends, and every single other country that has given us the staunchest support in this terrible war, started by the Russian terrorist regime, escalated by the Russian terrorist regime, and that will only be stopped when the Russian terrorist regime is stopped. Stop Russia, stop the war!
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 More sanctions on Russia!
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 Seize Russian assets!
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 It's very interesting to see these apologists complain about Russian assets being seized. That's unlawful, they scream and shout. That's escalation. Well, my friends, how else are we going to stop the Russian terrorist regime that has broken every agreement they had ever made with Ukraine in the past and has decided to act the way they please instead of respecting their word in the past? Why would anybody keep their word to somebody who refuses, chronically refuses to keep theirs? No, my friends. That doesn't mean we're breaking any treaties. Those treaties were broken long ago by the Russian terrorist regime, because the Budapest Memorandum was not signed only between Ukraine and Russia. There were more countries. The US, the UK, Belarus, Kazakhstan were all part of it, with China and France having a smaller intervention, smaller participation in this agreement. Let's not forget about that. The provisions Ukraine is getting right now are no mere charity. They are the West keeping its word made many years ago. That word is being kept now by some, but not by all. And that is what we stand here for, my friends. We thank the British people for the staunch support they have given us, and to encourage the rest of the world to follow suit, to do the same thing as the people of this country have done. That is the only way for us to win. All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 Russia is a terrorist state.
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 It is pointless to negotiate with a terrorist state that has broken their agreements in the past, my friends. I know that we are saying this message often and loudly, and the people who are listening might consider it repetitive at this point. But unfortunately, some people refuse to listen. So it's up to us to encourage them to use their better judgment and to finally understand that this war includes more than just Ukraine, more than just Russia, more than Belarus, more than any other country involved directly into it. If Russia could come to London tomorrow and claim it's their land whilst facing no repercussions, they would have done it immediately. Russia cannot be trusted, my friends. Russia cannot be negotiated with. Russia cannot be reasoned with. We can't reason with the unreasonable, with individuals who demand everything. So if nothing is given to them, they shout Nazi. If half is given to them, they complain and they moan and they demand the rest. But if everything is given to them, everything they wanted, they take it and next time they ask for double. That is the way of negotiating, the Russian way. And we must not forget about it, my friends. If we appease Russia any further, it will show that the West has weakened. It will show the West cannot uphold anything at all. That the West cannot defend the treaties made with it. The West cannot defend their interests, defend their people, defend their stability. And that will be a terrible precedent, my friends. Because it would mean that even organizations like the EU and NATO are not beyond Russian aggression. That's right. Had Ukraine joined NATO in the past, there would be no war in Ukraine. But Ukraine didn't. Because people were dragging their feet. Because of appeasers. Because of negotiators. These negotiators thought it would be a good idea to negotiate away parts of Ukraine, expecting Russia to be appeased. Well, my friends, we have learned it was not a good idea, because Russia has taken the lands given to them and has gone for more. They come again for all of Ukraine. They attacked Kyiv. And of course, with the usual Russian propaganda, the usual suspects, we all know it very well, my friends. They've claimed that it was a goodwill gesture to get out of Kyiv, when in reality they were cripplingly and embarrassingly beaten back by the Ukrainian forces. They were not expecting to face such staunch opposition. They were surprised. But now, they're preparing themselves more. And to give them time to prepare is foolishness, my friends. We have to help Ukraine now, not tomorrow, not in a month or a year. Right now, my friends. Because Russia could launch another full-scale invasion any day. And Ukraine will need the provisions to keep fighting and to win this war at last. But not only Ukraine, my friends. As we have said many times in the past, this war is not local, thank you. This is a global war that's happening right now. And Russia is using their own idea of neo-colonialism in countries like Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Sudan. Destabilizing the governments and putting their own terrorists, the Wagner Group, the infamous neo-Nazi battalion of the Wagner Group, sent to Ukraine to kill all of the Ukrainians that stood in their way. That battalion is now leaderless, my friends. Or rather, it belongs to the Russian regime itself. Because Prigozhin had the bright idea of negotiating with Russia. He had the bright idea of thinking that Putin's word could be trusted. Well, my friends, he was wrong. And he paid for his mistake with his life. Any further negotiations with Russia will not be rewarded with anything better by Russia, my friends. Russia rewards loyalty with abuse. Russia rewards opposition with aggression. We cannot continue to act as if these realities of life are not the truth. We cannot pretend to live in a pink world where Russia will take Ukraine and will be appeased and peace in the world. No, my friends. Were Ukraine to fall, Russia would go further. And for all the countries, especially the countries who are our neighbors, the neighbors of Ukraine, be ready. Because if Ukraine falls, you will be next. And that is why we stand here, my friends, to remind everybody in the world that this situation must not be allowed to come to pass. That is why we stand here, and that is why we will win. Thank you very much, sir. Slava Ukraini! Slava nacії! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
My friend, let's go. Sorry for that. We usually do a little musical break, but sometimes technical issues.
Everybody, thank you, you're in good voice tonight. So, I want to start off talking about, surprisingly, New Year's resolutions, even though it's the end of January now. So, what I want to talk about is my thoughts about 2024 and what shaped my thinking about that. And I always start the year reflectively, thinking about what's important, what I'm going to spend my time on, and making sure my time is spent to best effect. So last year and the year before, I spent a lot of time here and with other friends, local displaced people, humanitarian aid in Ukraine. And someone said to me, "Roman, you spend a lot of time on Ukraine, don't you?" So it made me think, what am I going to do in 2024? And there are two things that made me decide. The first thing, a very positive one, and it's the people I meet here. People like Sean, Svetlana, organisers, Alexander, who's over hiking over his hat somewhere, Pavlo, who comes and speaks, people like yourself who greet me every time with their own slava, and all the others. It's fantastic seeing your commitment, coming out when it's cold, coming out when it's wet, 3 times a week here standing with Ukraine. And I'm genuinely say, I'm proud to be here with you, and you inspire me to do more. Thank you. Unfortunately, there's a negative, but I also found it something that influenced me. And that's seeing what Russia and Putin are doing in doubling down on the war in Ukraine. They're not stopping, they're carrying on, they are relentless. So here's what I decided, and here's my thinking. 2024 isn't a year to falter. It's not a time to hesitate. So as Russia doubles down, I need to double down. I need to do more for Ukraine, not less. I need to work together with people like you and support people like you who are committed and constantly stand here for Ukraine. So what do we do together? We need to remind people that the war isn't over. We need to raise the profile of Ukraine above the noise, and so people realise what is happening with Ukraine, and to get more people to actively support Ukraine. So this is our message, a simple message, a clear message, and one that needs to come over loudly to everyone. Stand with us, stand together, stand with Ukraine. Stand with us. Together, stand with Ukraine. Stand with us, stand 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 together, stand with Ukraine. Thank you. So, I found an interesting article by someone called Jimmy Smith, and she was talking about language. And I also always bring out the importance of language, culture, literature, these things that make Ukraine distinct and a part of what makes an independent nation. And she talks about the current war in Russia deploying tactics around suppressing language to control the people in occupied countries. And this is what we see Russia doing, telling people through their propaganda there's no such thing as a Ukrainian culture. Ukrainian language is some kind of inferior form of Russian, and actually, why do we bother? It's all Russian anyway. They tell us that Ukrainian writers and poets are always really Russian, and that the language is somehow inferior. And we see what happens in the occupied territories. Schools forbidden to teach in Ukrainian. Ukrainian books called in and destroyed, and the Russian version of history to all the children from an early age. Now we know this is nothing new for Ukraine. This has been going on for hundreds of years. So again, we need to be firm, and it's up to us to get the message out, get this out loud and clear, so everyone understands. Ukraine is not Russia!
Ukraine is not Russia! Ukraine is not Russia! Ukraine is not Russia! Ukraine is not Russia! Ukraine is not Russia!
you. So this article talks about not just language but culture and Russia's attempts to destroy Ukrainian culture. And we've seen this in all sorts of ways, but particularly in the missile attacks that happened last year and are picking up this year. And what are they targeting? They're targeting all the cultural monuments, places like the Opera House in Odessa, libraries, national monuments. Not only that, they're looting museums, stealing artifacts, destroying anything that's Ukrainian and claiming it for themselves. So what they're trying to do is make sure that even if Ukraine wins the war, when people return to Ukraine, its shared culture has been damaged, its memories have been expunged, and it is weakened as a culture. So what we see is this campaign of destruction. What we see from Russia is a campaign of annihilation. And what we see is actually a campaign of downright wickedness. And why does this happen? It happens because Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. So, I've talked before about what the nature of Russia and the Russian army is. And I've described it as an army of looters, rapists and murderers. So people say that's hyperbole, but here are some facts. So this is a report from Derevyana in Karelia. Artyom Tereshchenko and his 71-year-old father were murdered on the 1st of August when two men, both of them ex-convicts, one fresh back from the front line, broke in, stabbed father and son to death and set their house on fire. Igor Sofonov had 3 more years to go for theft, robbery and attempted murder, but was recruited straight from jail by Russia's Ministry of Defense and sent to Ukraine. So these are the kind of people that Putin has unleashed on the peaceful population of Ukraine. The lowest of the low, the worst of the worst, the absolute dregs of humanity, free to rape, pillage and murder at will. And I say this must not continue, it's got to stop. So the message loud and clear to Russia is to take this army of looters, rapists and murderers and get out of Ukraine. Russia out of Ukraine!
Russia out of Ukraine! Russia out of Ukraine! Russia out of Ukraine! Russia out of Ukraine! Russia out of Ukraine! Russia out of Ukraine! Russia out of Ukraine!
Thank you. So, again, Pavlov's talked about Russian propaganda and these insidious messages that keep being repeated and repeated. So here are 3 of them. The counter-offensive has failed, Ukraine can't win. Another one, Russia's army is depleted, so it's no threat to anyone. And a third one, all we need to find is the right compromise with Russia, and that can end the war. My friends, all of these are false, all of these are lies. The answer is Ukraine can win the war. The war is not stalemated. There are 3 brigades operating on the eastern banks of the Dnipro River, and even after 3 months of fierce fighting, the Russian army has not been able to dislodge them. We also know that Russia's rearming rapidly, not just with existing weaponry, it's investing in new and innovative weapons to try and build up its forces. And the idea of a compromise is laughable. Russia will only finish this war on its own terms, and it will only finish this war by taking Ukraine. My friends, so many falsehoods, so many untruths, so many lies. So this is the message we need to get out to everyone. Russia lies about Ukraine. Don't fall for Russia's lies.
Russia lies about Ukraine. Don't fall for Russia's lies. Russia lies about Ukraine. Don't fall for Russia's lies. Russia lies about Ukraine. Don't fall for Russia's lies. Russia lies about Ukraine. Don't fall for Russia's lies. Russia lies about Ukraine. Don't fall for Russia's lies.
Thank you. Now, here's an interesting one. Before Christmas, Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, said at a press conference, Russia's not an imperialist country. What a laugh. Now, 2 weeks ago, the mask came off. And here is what the real thinking is about Russia. And this is from Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, who said, Ukrainians face a choice, being part of Russia or dying with their families. And my friends, this is even worse than what we've heard so far. What this means is, if you won't be part of Russia, we will just kill you all. So why does Russia treat Ukraine this way? Remember, this is what they'll do in Ukraine. This is what they will do with every other country they plan to go for after Ukraine. They'll destroy the language, they'll destroy the country, they will destroy the people. This is what Russia does and what it will do unless Ukraine is helped to win the war. Why does Russia do that? Because Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state.
Thank you. So, we all listened to Putin's address before Christmas. Another new propaganda lie that the war in Ukraine is simply a civil war. So this is some extension of his idea and theme that Russia and Ukraine are the same. And why is he doing that? It's simple. It's to start laying the groundwork and the rationale for a compromise. To suggest that in the civil war, Russia should keep the occupied territories. And this somehow is a formula for peace. My friend, this is simply abhorrent. The idea that you can cut off and give away territory for peace is appalling. This didn't work in 1930s for Czechoslovakia, and it will not work today. This is not a compromise. It's a betrayal, condemning free people to Russia's 21st century version of serfdom. And what it's saying is all one country needs to do is invade another, stay there a while, and they will end up getting what they want. This is banditry on an international scale and can't be allowed. We cannot allow countries to be cut to pieces, partitioned, salami sliced, and passed around as if they and their people are nothing. Our message here that we need to keep pushing is simple. Ukraine is one and always will be.
Ukraine is one and always will be. Ukraine is one and always will be.
Ukraine is one and always will be.
Ukraine is one and always will be. Ukraine is one and always will be. Ukraine is one and always will be.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, this is the time where we take a little moment to pause and think about the Ukrainian soldiers who have fallen in the war. And this is quite a difficult one of how we should do this and how we should mark this respectfully. So I decided to do it and talk through a poem in Ukrainian. And again, I like to bring things here that are to do with Ukraine, its language and culture, just to reinforce that point about the richness of culture of Ukraine and that it is not Russia. So this is a poem in Ukrainian for the soldiers who have laid down their lives defending Ukraine, its people and freedom. It's by a poet called Vasil Simonenko. It was actually written in 1955, very impressive to people from all those years ago. And apologies if I start to choke occasionally, this is very emotional, especially being read in Ukrainian. And I'll do verse in Ukrainian and I'll try and translate all of it in English. Можливо, знову загремлять гармати, і танк зімне пшеницю на лану, і буде плакати і журитись мати, коли сини йдуть на війну. Perhaps we will again hear the thunder of artillery and see tanks flattening the wheat on the plain. And there will be tears and mothers will worry when their sons go to war. І хтось повстане, поцілує милу, і хтось сльозу непрохану смахне, а може дехто втратить віру і силу, своє життя рятуючи одне. And someone will stand and kiss their dear one, and will wipe away an unwanted tear. And maybe someone will lose their faith and strength to try and save themselves. Але не я, як визнути не стану, хоч як не бути боляче мені, за нашу землю дорогу і кохану, я рад прийняти на себе всі вогні. But that will not be me. I will not shirk. Whether it is painful for me, I will stand for my land, dear and beloved, and I will bring upon myself any flames that this will bring. За тих дітей, що бігають до школи, за матерів, змарнілих у труді, за рідні наші верби до Кополі, за наші дні прекрасні і молоді. For those children who run to school, for those mothers who are thinned by their labours, for our willows that bend in the fields, and for our days joyful and young. І тут ні сліз, ні відчаю не треба, і тут не треба страху і ниття. Живе лиш той, що не живе для себе, хто для других виборює життя. And here, there are no tears, because they're not needed. And we don't need any fright or worry. The person who lives is the person who doesn't live for themselves, who fights for somebody else's life. You know, I found that poem very poignant, because that idea of fighting for someone else's life is what these people have done. So everyone, I'd like you to join me please in a few moments of respectful silence, and dedicate that silence to the memory of the many, many thousands of Ukrainian men and women who have given their lives to protect Ukraine, to protect its people, and to protect its freedom. We've remembered them in silence. Let's remember them with our voices. Heroi ne vmiraють!
Heroi ne vmирають!
Heroi ne vmирають!
Heroi ne vmирають!
Heroi ne vmирають!
Героям не вмирай!
Thank you. So, I think as Pablo said, we have a lot to be thankful for. And as we stand opposite 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence, I feel privileged to be here at the heart of one of the greatest democracies in the world. And I want us to say thank you to the Prime Minister and the government of Great Britain for their help and support to Ukraine. Now, I can't thank everyone, but I'm going to call out for 3 people in particular. So let's start with Sir David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary. His clear support for Ukraine, despite a packed agenda as Foreign Secretary. Thank you, Sir David!
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 So, next shout out is to Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary. Not only for his strong words and his strong support for Ukraine, but the practical help in January, promptly sending air defence after Russia started its big waves of missile attacks in January. Thank you, Grant Shapps!
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 And finally, to our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, again actively supporting Ukraine, visiting Kyiv, being there, addressing the Ukrainian Parliament at a particularly dangerous time, and making his and Britain's support visible and real by signing a security treaty with Ukraine and increasing military aid. So let's make this one really loud. Thank you, Rishi Sunak!
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 So, one of those shout-outs, David Cameron, in a recent speech, talks about the world needing to provide Ukraine with the means to end the war. This is what he said. We have to recognise that Putin thinks he can wait us out, and we have to show him that this is absolutely not the case. And this is again the tactic of Russia that Pablo talked about, doubling down, trying to stay the course, waiting out the Western democracies, thinking he will stay and they will go. Lord then saying, Ukraine can't win the war. But what Cameron said is Ukraine has been incredibly successful in pushing back Russia. And so we have to stand with them for as long as it takes, show patience, the strength of our economies, and provide them with what is necessary. The language is clear. Ukraine can win the war, and Ukraine needs to get back all its territory. So we say this again, that Ukraine is one and has to stay as one. And for the people who think that Ukraine should cede its territories, let's listen to Ukraine's Defence Minister, Rustem Umerov, and what he said at Davos. If you tolerate someone's aggression today, disregarding territorial integrity, the occupants will continue such hostility. If you feed a bear today, if you appease, accept and tolerate its behaviour, the bear will come back for more. And if people think that ceding territory will bring peace, all they are doing is bequeathing the war to the next generation. We are passing another war, a more terrible war, to our children and grandchildren. So the world cannot and must not accept what Russia is doing in Ukraine. We have to help Ukraine win the war. And the only way to stop the war is to stop feeding the bear. Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war! Stop Russia, stop the war! Stop Russia, stop the war! Stop Russia, stop the war! Stop Russia, stop the war! Stop Russia, stop the war!
about arming Ukraine. And again, propaganda topic, we shouldn't arm Ukraine. Why should we arm Ukraine? Why are we wasting our money on Ukraine? So let's start with the principle of why Britain, America and other countries should arm Ukraine. So in 1994, the Budapest Memorandum, which Pavlo talked about, was signed. Ukraine unilaterally gave up the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world in exchange for security guarantees to make Europe a safer place for us all to live. And these are guarantees that Ukraine was given, not words. Thank you. And remembering, giving up nuclear weapons was to make Europe a safer place. So this isn't just about Ukraine, this is about Europe. Finnish Foreign Minister said, we need to understand this is not charity, because Ukraine is fighting for us. And heaven forbid, if Putin wins the war or even freezes the war, Russia will rearm, Russia will be back for more, the bear cannot be appeased. Russia does not want peace. The United Kingdom is showing the way. A huge thank you to the government of Britain. But what I would also do is ask Ukraine's international partners to pick up the pace, accelerate the supply of weapons, act fast, act now. Arm Ukraine as you promised.
Arm Ukraine as you promised. Arm Ukraine as you promised. Arm Ukraine as you promised. Arm Ukraine as you promised. Arm Ukraine as you promised. Arm Ukraine as you promised. Arm Ukraine as you promised. Arm Ukraine
as you promised, definitely. Thank you. So I found this the other day, very interesting, an interview with Latvia's foreign minister in which he talked about Russia's enduring imperial ambitions. And he said Russia will not stop at Ukraine and will look for new targets after its aggression against Kyiv is over. This is Krišjānis Kariņš, Latvia's foreign minister. And he said the West needs a long-term strategy to contain Russia as it has an imperialistic fueled ideology, which means that the threat from Moscow will remain even under a new president and even if Ukraine regains all its occupied territory. Russia will not stop. Russia can only be stopped, he says. And this we can see not just in the Baltic states, Poland, Sweden, Finland, Norway. They all understand Russia's imperial ambitions. Some of them, like the Baltic countries, have been directly occupied by Russia for decades before their independence in 1991. And what they understand is Russia has a campaign to reclaim its so-called historic lands. And this campaign is a threat to freedom and democracy in Europe, and it's a threat to the whole of Europe. And Ukraine needs help to neutralise that threat. And another quote from Kariņš. To anyone who thinks that it is expensive to support Ukraine, my message is simple. It will only get more expensive if Russia is not stopped. So arm Ukraine to protect Europe.
Arm Ukraine to protect Europe. Arm Ukraine to protect Europe. Arm Ukraine to protect Europe. Arm Ukraine to protect Europe. Arm Ukraine to protect Europe. Arm Ukraine to protect Europe. Arm Ukraine to protect Europe.
Thank you. This is a card I was hoping I wouldn't use tonight. So, we've seen for weeks and perhaps even months, American lawmakers are stuck in this quagmire of indecision. Now, it's said that most US senators and congressmen want more arms for Ukraine and for support for Ukraine. And here is what General David Petraeus of America said and why that is vital. He said, if we allow Ukraine to fall, Russia will next invade Moldova or the Baltics. Ukraine only needs a very small part of our own military budget. We must help Ukraine achieve victory. And his phrase is, "Get it done, America." And I know you all wholeheartedly agree with this. So let's add our voice. Let's say it loud, let's say it clear. USA on Ukraine!
USA on Ukraine! USA on Ukraine! USA on Ukraine! USA on Ukraine! USA on Ukraine! USA on Ukraine! USA on Ukraine! USA on Ukraine! And on Ukraine now!
And on Ukraine now, definitely. So, recent interview with Volodymyr Zelensky said the most urgent need is air defence. We've seen that the drone and missile attacks from Russia are not slowing down. They're getting bigger, they're getting more frequent. So let me begin by saying again a huge thank you to Great Britain for promptly sending more air defence to Ukraine weeks ago. But what we're asking is all countries to follow the UK's lead, for all countries to provide more air defence, and for more countries to do it now. Air defence, send it now!
Air defence, send it now! Air defence, send it now! Air defence, send it now! Air defence, send it now! Air defence, send it now! Air defence, send it now! Air defence, send it now! Air defence, send it now!
Thank you. Now is not too soon either. So, thinking about people who've supported Ukraine and countries that have supported Ukraine, Germany too has been a good friend of Ukraine. It's actually the second biggest provider of military aid to Ukraine after the US. The Chancellor Olaf Scholz has been a vocal supporter and urged allies to step up military support for Ukraine. So we're genuinely grateful to Chancellor Scholz and to Germany for all the support and everything that they've done. Now, one thing and part of their arsenal that could help Ukraine is Taurus missiles. They could help a lot, and people think that sending these would be a brave act by Germany. And again, thank you. Just thinking about these Russian propaganda messages of delay and indecision, one German MP said, Putin is counting us on being afraid of our bravery. So here's my message to Olaf Scholz and Germany's decision makers. Be brave, don't be afraid, don't hesitate. Taurus missiles, send them now!
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 Taurus missiles, send them now! Taurus missiles, send them now! Taurus missiles, send them now!
Thank you. Send them now! Definitely. Right. So here's another shout out and thank you, this time to Poland. So, quote from an article. Poland's top diplomat Radoslaw Sikorski said on social media that the West should respond in language that Putin understands. And I think this is a real good idea in language that Putin understands. He urged allies to provide Kyiv with long-range missiles that will enable it to take out launch sites and command centres. So we know Poland is amongst Ukraine's staunchest allies, and the new administration in Warsaw is doubling down on political support to Ukraine. So thank you, Poland. Thank you, Sikorski. Let's add our voices to those from Poland in language that Putin understands. Long-range missiles, send them now!
Long-range missiles, send them now!
Long-range missiles, send them now!
Long-range missiles, send them now! Long-range missiles, send them now! Long-range missiles, send them now! Long-range missiles, send them now!
Thank you. So, I'm going to move on to a different topic and talk a little bit about Ukraine. And I'm afraid this is...
gas and
Yeah,
oil.
maybe later. So, Unilever. Always starts with Unilever who continue to trade in Russia. Now, Unilever say they supply only essential goods. Now, didn't know that ice cream was an essential good. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But there we go. So here's something from Valeria Moshchevska from the Ukrainian Solidarity Project, talking about what Unilever are doing in their tactics. And she says they think they can just sit this out, that every day the war goes on, Unilever's complicity deepens. And yes, Unilever are complicit. They say they're only selling essential goods and ice cream and things like that, but they're paying taxes to the Russian government. The taxes that they pay to the Russian government pay for 39 bullets every second. Their taxes in 15 minutes pay for one of those drones that are flying over Ukraine and killing civilians night after night. Unilever has been branded an international sponsor of war. They have blood on their hands. And I say this to Unilever, it doesn't matter how much soap you make and sell, it will not wash away this blood, it will not wash away this shame. Unilever, shame on you!
Unilever, shame on you!
Unilever, shame on you!
Unilever, shame on you!
Unilever,
Shame on you! Unilever, shame on you!
Thank you. Now, the statistics show there are more than 1,600 foreign companies that have continued business as usual in Russia. So, reasons that they give, like Unilever, they only sell essential goods, ice cream, shoes, soft drinks, chocolate. Nestle, they cite worries about abandoning their staff. Doesn't matter what's happening in Ukraine, we won't abandon our staff in Russia. And Carlsberg says, we can't find a buyer for our business. Never mind that other business have been seized from them because they want to leave Russia. Now, the sadder thing is, it's not just companies that are operating in Russia that we have to worry about. Too many companies continue to trade with Russia. And too many of these are not just selling these so-called essential goods, but they're actively helping Putin's war machine. Too much precision machinery is still getting into Russia and getting into their arms factory. From Germany, from Italy, from Switzerland, all through shady shell companies and shadowy middlemen. The statistics show that 80% of precision machine tools are going to armaments plants that are now producing missiles and drones. This trade has to stop. It has to stop now, and there's only one way to do this. Total embargo on Russia!
Total embargo on Russia! Total embargo on Russia! Total embargo on Russia! Total embargo on Russia! Total embargo on Russia! Total embargo on Russia! Total embargo on Russia! Total embargo on Russia!
We still have to have a total embargo on Russia. We can finish that off if you want. So, we've talked about Unilever, we've talked about trade, but it's not enough just to stop trade. There are billions of pounds in ill-gotten gains that are sloshing around the international finance system because of the war. And this really is blood money. Russian oligarchs, Putin's cronies, shadowy middlemen, carpetbaggers in Ukraine, all getting rich through the war. So we need to make sure that they can't get hold of their blood money. Seize Russian assets!
Seize Russian assets!
Seize Russian assets!
Seize Russian assets! Seize Russian assets! Seize Russian assets! Seize Russian assets! Seize Russian assets! Seize Russian assets!
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start wrapping up now because I've been here for long enough. So a couple of reflective moments. Many years ago, a Ukrainian nationalist leader said this: I nastane czas, коли один скаже слава Україні, і мільйони відповідатимуть героям слава. There will come a day when one person says Slava Ukraini and millions will reply Heroyam Slava. And we've seen that dream come true. Since February 2022, we've seen an enormous outpouring of support for Ukraine, help for its people, support for its freedom in so many different ways. But we live in a fast-moving world. Lots of change, lots of priorities, lots of noise. And that means we can't rely on keeping that support alive without us doing things to grow that support for Ukraine. So I ask you to do this. Remember what I said at the start. As Putin doubles down on the war, we need to double down for what we do for Ukraine. 2024 is not a time to delay. It's not a time to falter. It is not a time to doubt ourselves. Now, on that journey standing with Ukraine, we can feel lonely. Thank you. And I felt like loneliness sometimes too. But actually I know I'm not alone. On that journey, I am with great people like you who inspire me. People like you who make me proud to be here, standing for Ukraine and standing with Ukraine. So, we need to redouble our efforts. We need to continue to build support for Ukraine, and most importantly, we will do that together. And that togetherness on our journey for Ukraine is our biggest strength. And we know that slogan, Razom my sila, together we are mighty, my friends. And we all know the destination of that journey that we're on. It's a journey that we're on together and will take us to one place. Razom do peremoghy, my friends. Together to victory. And remember, all together we will win.
All together we will win. All together we will win. All together we will win. All together we will win. All together we will win. All together we will win. All together we will win.
So, we'll finish this speech as the Slava Ukraini, which is great. You've done lots of chanting. You've been in a really good voice tonight. Thank you. So, I'd like you to join me and make one big, final, loud effort. I know we're not a million people, but as we're standing here tonight, let's make it sound like we are. Slava Ukraini! Slava Ukraini! Slava Ukraini! Slava Nazi! And the most important thing is how we live. Ukraina! 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 Thank you all.
Thank you.
And now we will have a short musical break.
You're welcome. Slava.
Slava Ukraini! Slava Ukraini! Slava Nazi! Ukraina! I'm just glad to be here today, and Roman and Pavlo are always difficult acts to follow, but I'll try anyway. Thank you to Roman. I caught most of that. It's always a lesson, and it's always interesting to listen to. And Pavlo, you've always got that passion, that enthusiasm that rubs off on everyone. Unfortunately, I couldn't be here last week, so I didn't make it, but it's really good to be back here because you are like my family. That's how I consider you. Whenever I come here to the protest, I think everything's okay. And we can join together and we can shout about Ukraine. I think we've gone again. Hello? Hello, hello. Have we got a megaphone? Hello, hello. Anybody got a megaphone? Hello? Yeah, that's it. So what I wanted to do before I gave my speech, I wanted to talk about the last time I came and why it's important to protest here. So remember, we're protesting at the heart of government here in the UK. This is Whitehall, and when we look, we see people going up and down. And last time I was here, I think it could have been a Sunday, and people were out, people were milling around, and I spotted the former leader of the Scottish National Party. His name is Ian Blackford. And I spoke to him, I said, thank you for everything you've done for Ukraine, thank you for your support. And he said to me, we need to do more. And I agree with that sentiment. So we're grateful for what the UK government is doing, but they can still do more and they have to do more. Roman was talking a little bit about America before. Regardless of what goes on in America, we need to be able to protect our safety, security, our way of life, our rights, our values in Europe. And we shouldn't have to rely on America for that. It's up to European countries to step up to the mark, regardless of what goes on in Slovakia, regardless of what goes on in Hungary. The overwhelming majority enjoy the life we have, the values, the rights, and we need to fight for them, and we need to put our money where our mouth is. At the beginning of this full-scale invasion, there was a lot of concern about an escalation, about Russia escalating its war on Ukraine. What we're currently seeing is Russia escalating things on a global scale. Hesitancy, indecision, and inaction remain the biggest signs of weakness. As Zelensky said at Davos, we must show that global unity is not weaker than global hatred. Before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, there were plenty of signs of Russia escalating aggression. One of them I remember, and I was living in Ukraine at that time. That was the shooting down of MH17 in 2014. War was already raging in eastern Ukraine as the Russian army and its proxies battled against the Ukrainian government. Yet the deaths of nearly 300 people on board MH17 and the Kremlin's refusal to admit its role in bringing down the plane was an alarm call through which many in the West managed to sleep. If Russia is allowed to capture any territory in Ukraine, it is not going to stop there. Russia, Iran and North Korea are already on a war footing. They're already working together and they will be emboldened by weakness. It's clear that this trio of countries aren't going to tread carefully for fear of escalation. And the only way to deal with this situation is to stop Russia, stop the war.
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 And of course, arm Ukraine now.
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 The last time I was here and spoke, I gave reasons for optimism in 2024. Sometimes it's hard to be optimistic after 700 days of war and countless brutal acts. But when times are harder, each one of us, friends of Ukraine, Ukrainians, those who value human rights, democracy, need to work that little bit harder. Roman was talking about Rishi's visit to Ukraine and some of the promises he made. And I welcomed all of those, and I welcomed the rhetoric too. Some of the things he said Putin must understand that no army can defeat free people, and therefore Ukraine must win. Great, super. He also said Putin has now reached the point where he has to humiliate himself to ask for weapons from Iran and North Korea. Crucially though, Iran and North Korea are providing a constant supply of weapons. North Korea is providing Russia with cruise missiles. Iran has provided a constant supply of Shahed drones, and Iran has even helped to build a Shahed factory in Russia. So that's the help that they're getting. We need to see that replicated from our European friends and our friends across the world. He also said, we will help you win the war, and we've announced the largest military aid package ever. What I say as a campaigner, as a protester, as a friend of Ukraine, it doesn't stop there with the promises. We need to hold these people to account. It's great that the UK stepped up, but it doesn't end there. We need to see a better defence infrastructure in the UK to deliver on these promises, to deliver on this guarantee. So, for example, the factory that built the Challenger 2 tank is now a housing estate. So we need to make sure that Britain has the capability to do this, that Britain has the capability to carry out its promises, and we need to double aid to Ukraine. So what we've seen is an improvement, but we need to see more. Arm Ukraine now!
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 And also we're right to call for a total embargo of Russian oil and gas. But unfortunately, our words are not always being backed up by our actions. So I read an article in the New Statesman this week, and I was very disappointed. So it said, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, UK-based P&I clubs have insured more than 120 billion euros in Russian oil and gas products. The oil is refined in countries such as India. It might arrive as Russian oil at the refinery in Gujarat, but once it's been refined, it is sold as Indian oil. And Europe has been buying Indian diesel at a rate of more than 300,000 barrels a day. So we can't just think because we've said, or that European leaders have said that we won't buy Russian gas and oil, that is the end of the story. It certainly isn't. And a specialist in the analysis of Russian oil flows says Russian oil has consistently been traded above the oil price cap. So we have a price cap for Russian oil, but we've discovered that the price cap is not implemented. So it's just talk, and we can't just have this talk, because as Roman says, every penny that the Russians get back for whatever they sell, that goes on the war on Ukraine, and it means more bullets, more bombs, and crucially, it means more Ukrainian lives are lost. And we can't have this. And I think back to when I lived in Ukraine. So I lived in Ukraine until about 2016. And I remember on the television, there was a very effective campaign about checking the barcodes of products when you go to the supermarket. And the illustration was, when you buy products made in Russia, the Russian soldiers with their Kalashnikovs come one step closer to you. And that's what it is. So we need to wake up about buying Russian products. We shouldn't find these sneaky ways round about satisfying our appetite for Russian oil. We should stop that. So total embargo on Russia.
Total embargo on Russia!
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 So the trade that delivers a river of money to the Kremlin has continued. The ruble may have been devalued, but increasing revenues from oil have generated record revenue. In 2022 alone, Russia's current account recorded a $227 billion surplus, enough to fight this war in Ukraine for at least another 3 years. And that's why we need to wake up about this. So we're saying, world, wake up!
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 We've committed politically and financially to resisting Putin, but we've failed to look properly at our own businesses and to ask which of them is helping to continue this war. So we need an honest conversation about this. There are certainly good things that are going on, and we thank Rishi for this. But in some areas we could do better. I want to end this speech with another phrase Zelensky used in his Davos speech. He said, so he's speaking to people who are tired of supporting Ukraine, and we cannot afford to be tired. And unfortunately, that's demonstrating a weakness. He said, for those who want to reduce support, every reduction in pressure on the aggressor adds years to this war. He's right, because Ukrainians are not just going to give up like that. Ukrainians value freedom and liberty so much. He continues, but every investment and confidence in the defender shortens this war. So by supporting Ukraine, we end this war sooner. Support Ukraine as you promised.
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 And this is particularly important because I don't know if you read the newspapers this morning. There was a big headline in the Telegraph, and a British general said that we may have to start conscription in this country because we don't have enough soldiers and there's a real threat from Russia. And this echoes other generals around Europe. I read something by a German general, a Swedish general too. And some people say this is alarmist. We can only say this is alarmist because right now it is Ukraine standing on the front line. It is Ukrainian soldiers fighting Russia and ensuring that they don't encroach on more territory in Europe. Because believe me, if Ukraine falls, they will come for other countries too. And there is speculation, I think Roman talked about Medvedev, there is speculation about the corridor to Königsberg, Kaliningrad, and they're hell-bent on creating that. So let's not kid ourselves up. We've kidded ourselves up for far too many years. We've not taken the Russian threat seriously enough. So we need to start getting serious about Russia. We need to start listening to Ukraine more. We need to start listening to Russia's neighbours a little bit more, because they've been on the receiving end for many years. They know exactly what it's like. I'll end it by saying, Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
Slava Nazi!
Смерть ворогам!
Ukraina!
Понад усе!
And before we sing the national anthem, which I believe is coming up, when I was in Ukraine during the Revolution of Dignity, this was the ultimate song to hear. This was the ultimate song that brought everybody together. This anthem carries so much meaning. When people in Ukraine sing it, they sing it with so much emotion because it means so much to them, because Ukraine and being Ukrainian means so much to them. So when we listen to it, let's think about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whoa!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Поки ми завершимо ралі, нагадування, що ми зустрічаємося тут 3 рази на тиждень. В середу, як сьогодні, 6 до 8, п'ятницю, 6 до 8, неділю, з 3 до 5. Just a brief reminder before we conclude our rally. We meet here 3 times a week. Wednesday like today, 6 to 8. Friday, 6 to 8. And Sunday, 3 to 5. All right, let's make us heard. Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава Його!
слава захисникам і захисницям тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Thank you very much. I'll see you on Friday.